When I look back at a pretty long career in technology so far, I look back at my early years and I think about what was it that I did early on that set me up for the success I've had over the course of my career. And when I look at it, there were some things that I just lucked into, and I'm going to share those tips with you. But there were some things that I did intentionally that worked out really, really well. I share these 6 secrets of early career success with you because there are also some massive pitfalls. There are some things you can do to set yourself up for early career failure. And so I want to use these 6 success tactics to explain to you first what you want to be doing, but also a lot of the pitfalls that early on in your career can set you up for either a shortened career or just continual struggle to move forward. You can set yourself back significantly. So the first one, the absolutely most important thing you can do is surround yourself with good people. You hear this a lot, but I cannot overemphasize it enough. First piece that you start with, look at leadership. And that's not just technical leadership, that's also who's going to be providing you with direction. You want leaders who understand how to mentor you, who understand how to create a safety net for you so that you can struggle, risk, take on those more complex projects, but there's a safety net. So if things start going wrong, if you're out of your depth, they're going to be there to support you, not blame you. If you don't have high quality leaders to begin with, what you're going to find is number one, you get a little jaded in the work world. You don't have a whole lot of direction. You're set up for your failure. You're not going to understand really the core concepts of what it is that you do just from a process or workflow standpoint. And again, you're set up to fail. You're not going to move forward as quickly. And if you try to move to another team, worst practices will follow you and haunt you for years. And you'll have to retrain yourself to do the job that you do better. Second, you want to look at that technical side of the leadership. Who's going to mentor you and give you the capabilities you need to continually improve and get better? The faster you can get through those basics, the fundamentals and foundational concepts, the faster you move to that mid-level and senior level role, because that's where you really get the knowledge. That's where you get the more interesting projects and you make yourself more valuable to the company. You want to progress through those basics as quickly as possible. So look at the team that surrounds you and see who is going to mentor you. Do people on that team actually have time to lead and mentor? Is that an expectation? Is it a requirement? And how capable are they? Just because you have a management title or a principal job title doesn't mean you're any good at mentoring or leading. A lot of people get battlefield promotions or they're promoted past their level of competence. So you want to look at the team as a whole and first understand who it is that's going to be leading and mentoring you, but then look at the people around you. Are they producers? Are they people you actually want to work with? You'd be surprised how many times you're going to land on a team, and if you're not careful, you could land on a team where you are the only producer. That's a road to burnout because everything that goes right, believe me, everyone around you is going to take credit for it. Everything that goes wrong, you're going to get the blame for. You'll be working the most hours. So look at the people around you. When they're producers, you have a better team environment. You're going to be working on more interesting projects, and you're not going to get burnt out. You're going to be used appropriately. So that's huge. Look at the team, leadership, technical mentorship, and are you going to actually be working with producers? So that's my first tip. Second, job titles don't matter. Getting paid and getting that experience does. Don't worry about what your job title is. I learned this really early on. I just moved forward. I didn't have a specific job title. At first I thought, oh, I'm going to be a software developer. And I quickly realized, somebody said this early in my career. They said, look, if the paycheck's right, who cares what they call you? It was kind of one of those, oh, wow, that's right. But there's a second side to that, which is the experience side. Just because you're getting paid today doesn't mean that you're going to be getting paid tomorrow. What really makes the difference in your not only career trajectory, but also your value, how well you get paid now and in the future, is the type of experience you're getting, the type of projects that you're working on, and how relevant what you do is to creating value for the business. What type of skills are you getting that are going to set you apart from people in 5 or 10 years from now? What are you going to be able to look back on and point to and say, look, this is a source of authority. This is a source of competence. And this makes me stand out. So what are some examples? I worked on some very complex projects early in my career. I was able to improve products significantly early in my career. I was able to improve processes. I took a company that was fairly chaotic and created quality assurance. I mean, just software quality assurance processes that improved not just the quality of the product, but also made the company money. They saved a lot of money and were able to reallocate development resources away from continually patching and hot fixing their way into production and focus those resources on doing new projects, building new features and functionality. I was able to make a tangible difference to the business, and it didn't matter what my job title was. No one cares now what I was called when I made those results happen. They just care that I've done that now. So that's important, and that helped me advance in my career. When someone says, why do you deserve this promotion? Why do you deserve to run this team? Why should I put this much investment into you? Because I'm going to be paying you a lot. And I was able to point at specific business outcomes. Also, you want to be able to point at technical outcomes. You want to be working on projects that aren't just sleepers. You want to have interesting projects on your profile. You want to start building a body of work. And this is something that you'll do later on in your career. But building a body of work starts with having technically complex projects on your resume. Technically interesting projects are even better. Those are going to give you the core capabilities you need to be valuable. And again, to point back to, and when people say, well, why shouldn't we make you a principal or distinguished or staff, whatever role that you go into, you can point at these projects and they are sources of authority. They are more important than a job title. No one cares that you used to be a senior or a staff if you can't point to results. That experience, if you don't actually have capabilities because you've been working on vanilla projects the whole time as a really cool titled person, you're not going to advance. And so long term, you can set yourself up for failure by chasing a title over chasing, number one, compensation. Obviously, you want to get paid as early in your career because the more you get paid now, the more you will get paid in the future, but only if you also develop the capabilities, experience, and showcase projects, products, and results, business outcomes. If you develop those, you're going to warrant an increase in compensation. And it's going to happen a lot faster if you focus on the money, the experience, and the outcomes instead of just the job title. And I got very fortunate by not really caring what the job title was, just caring if I could have an impact and if I was getting paid. So it may sound a little shallow, but actually long-term in your career, that's an excellent way to start figuring out how to move forward as quickly as possible. This one's a little bit more meta, but it's extraordinarily important. Move from being externally motivated to internally motivated. When you're early on in your career, everyone wants to tell you what to do. Everyone's giving you career advice. And you're asking everyone for career advice, which is great. You want to have as many perspectives as you can. You want to listen to as many people as possible. Because I'll be honest, you can learn something from anyone. And this is incredibly important throughout your career, is continue to learn from everyone. But the motivation, what you decide to do, what goals you decide to set for yourself as early as possible, make sure you're the one setting those goals and other people aren't out there telling you, hey, this is what you should do. That's what you should do. And you're listening to it and doing it because they said to do it, not because that's actually what's right for you to do. So how do you develop internal motivation? The first thing you have to do is review your goals. And you're going to quickly realize that most of your goals right now are the business telling you this is what you should do, or management telling you this is what you should do. You may realize, if you look back at what you did for an educational path, you may realize that your educational path was dictated by a teacher, by a career counselor, by your parents. There are a whole lot of external factors that come into play and often drag our careers down a path that you may get 5 or 10 years down and go, wait a minute, I never wanted this in the first place. That is the absolute pitfall of being externally motivated and listening to everyone else's advice instead of synthesizing their advice and then for yourself deciding this is where I want my career to go. Because as soon as you become internally motivated, you can become an advocate for yourself. You're no longer saying, well, I want to do this because someone else said it. You have the confidence and the foundation of saying, I'm doing this because I want to do it. And you start getting passionate when you become internally motivated versus externally motivated. And you can start focusing on the real measurements of career progress rather than vanity metrics. And job title is one of those vanity metrics. But when you become internally motivated, all of a sudden you realize you have different goals. And there's probably a compensation goal and there's probably an experience goal. And you can evaluate all of those pieces, all of those goals with respect to what you actually want to do instead of what everyone around you wants you to do. So that's huge. Become internally motivated. Decide on your goals for yourself and advocate for your career from that standpoint of passion. Now, close extension from that last secret is start building value for yourself. Now that you're no longer externally motivated, now that you're working on internal motivation, also work on internal value creation. When you work for another company, all that work that you do, you get paid for it. But the primary benefactor of the value that you create from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or whatever hours you end up working, it's the company you work for. So you have to start building value for yourself. That's a different mindset because we often connect ourselves with our employer. And I did that early on in my career. And I had a few people show me by example that long term, if the only person you're creating value for is the owner of the company or people, the shareholders, if they're the only ones you're creating value for, what are you left with at the end of your career? Not much. What are you left with in the middle of your career? Not much. You're going to want to create multiple streams of revenue. You're not just going to want to be dependent upon an employer for everything, because what happens when you're downsized? What happens when you're laid off? The business closes. All that value that you've created for that business, where did it go? You don't have any of that. So if you're not creating value for yourself, you can find yourself in, no matter how high of a performer you are, you can find yourself in some pretty terrible positions because the business is your source of authority and the business is where all of your value is invested in. So begin to create value, build value for yourself. Now, what does that mean? You don't want to have your career tied to the business. You want to, in many ways, become your own brand. You want to establish a professional portfolio, a body of work that no matter what happens to the companies you may have worked for, you can always point at that portfolio, that body of work, and say, this is a source of my authority. That's mine. So that's your first source of authority. And that goes very way back to get that experience, get those projects on your resume, and start building a body of work, because that's you building value for you. That's you creating. That's the very beginning of a brand. And start early. Start building that brand early. Now, get some side gigs, get some side hustles, work on side projects, because some of those are going to be things that, they just go away. That happens to everybody. But you're going to start finding new sources of revenue from one or two of those side projects. So if you're doing a few a year, you're going to very quickly get rid of the ones that are losers. You're going to get better and better at spotting the winners, those side projects that result in a little bit of side money, and eventually become long-term revenue streams. There'll be opportunities for you to individually start a business or get together with a group and found something, and that is value that's yours. Find opportunities to build value for yourself, or find ways for the company to reward you in such a way that when the company does well, you do well too. And long term, that's going to build value for you so that no matter what happens, those things that are out of your control, no matter what happens, you have control of your value and of your brand. And so if you continue to invest in yourself and build value that's yours, you're going to have a longer career, and you're also going to be more resilient to those things that are going to happen throughout your career that you just simply can't control. So as soon as possible, start building value for yourself. Now, everyone talks about continuous learning. Everyone talks about, oh, you're going to have to learn forever, and you are, especially in technology. Then you move into strategy or leadership or any number of different directions that you can from a technical role. You'll be learning forever. But what does that mean? Some people learn in an undirected fashion. They learn just whatever's trendy. They learn whatever they think might help them. But it's not focused. Focused learning is learning that's going to result in something tangible. Again, building that value. When you're continuously learning, you want to have that in the back of your mind. Number one, you're internally motivated. So what you decide to learn should be dictated by your short and long-term career goals. And second, everything that you learn needs to have some sort of practical application. Remember, you're building value for yourself. So how is learning this thing that you're going to learn and take on and invest time into, sometimes invest money into, how is this going to improve you and build value for you? And that's really important. What is focused, directed, applied, continuous learning? What does that look like? Well, I tell people this. You learn and then you apply. That cycle, learn, apply, is critical to focused learning, because now you're not just learning for, maybe I'll use it someday. You're learning with the intent of applying it in the very near term. That's going to keep your learning focused. If you can't apply it in the near term, maybe it's not worth learning right now. Probably worth learning, but maybe that's something that you can push off to a later date when you actually can apply it. But learn, apply also sort of reveals some of the things that you could be learning that might be cool, but they're not going to be that valuable to you, because if you can't apply it, maybe it's a hobby. Maybe it's something that you want to put off to the side because it's not going to build the kind of value that you expect it to. Now, finally, I left off a third piece to that learn, apply, because this won't be relevant until later on in your career. But eventually you're going to go learn, apply, teach. And this is something you start doing at about year 3 to year 5, is you've got the confidence in your capabilities. You've produced, you've done things now. You've established trust in the people around you. Now you want to start teaching. So learn, apply, teach, and teach as early as possible. I say 3 years, that's professionally, but you can write blog posts anytime. You can do videos or tutorials anytime. Anything you learn that you can present in a clear manner is an opportunity for you to teach, and especially if you do that learn, apply. So you learn something, you build maybe a side project or an independent project, or maybe you're doing something that's fairly interesting at work, and write a blog about it. Write a tutorial about it. Give a talk about it. Any of those are opportunities to do that third piece. And the sooner you can go from just learn, apply to learn, apply, teach, the faster you're going to become a mentor yourself, and the faster, it's a fast track to very senior technical positions and eventually leadership positions. Learn, apply, teach, and get to that teach as soon as you possibly can in your career. Now, finally, when I talk about building a brand and building value for yourself and all of these other concepts that I've introduced, I want to explain sort of a foundational piece of everything I've talked to you about, which is differentiation and competitive advantage. Think of yourself as a business and start thinking of yourself that way very early on. I was lucky. I started a business early while I was in college, and I got to learn that I was a business. And I looked at myself that way for my entire career. Even now, I look at myself as a business. So I need to have differentiators and competitive advantages, or I'm replaceable. Or there's no reason for you to buy something from me or bring me in to build a project or provide you services If I don't have a differentiator or competitive advantage, the only way I get work is being lucky. If someone decides, hey, well, yeah, we'll go with this person. Often, if you don't have any differentiators or competitive advantages, you find yourself competing on price, which means you get paid less, lower compensation. So think about this. You need to have a unique value proposition. You need to have a strong one. And everything that I've talked about, all those other pieces of advice are really aimed at improving your value proposition and giving you those competitive advantages that make you stand out, those differentiators that make you stand out. And you can talk about that from everything that I've mentioned, your experience, the teams that you've worked on, those results that you've been able to drive. Who have you taught? What have you learned? How have you applied it? And then who'd you teach? Are these people now successful? Have you taught and mentored people who they themselves are now either intermediate or expert level at doing the things that you taught them? How has moving from external to internal motivation and building value for yourself created a unique value proposition for you? And that's really why it's important to go from externally motivated, where people are telling you what value to build, and it's typically value that they want you to build for them, to internally motivated, where you're building value for yourself. You're building intentionally. You're learning intentionally. You are creating an intentional, and you hear me hitting this word over and over again, career path, where you're deciding what's going to be best for you long term, not letting other people tell you what's going to be best for you long term. You're building this value for yourself, and by doing that, you're creating competitive advantages and differentiators that will stay with you for the rest of your career. So get to this stage as soon as you can. Focus on what makes you stand out and be more valuable than anyone else around you. The more of these differentiators and competitive advantages you have, the faster you advance. And that's critical. The more likely it is that you are going to get on one of those signature projects early on. And the more complex work, the better teams you're going to have an opportunity to work with. So that's why it's key to build out those competitive advantages, because it's going to justify why you should be put on those complex projects. It's going to start making opportunities come to you. That's the amazing thing about competitive advantages and differentiators. Once you have them and you get good at explaining them to other people and sharing them, evangelizing, really selling yourself. When you get good at that, because you have competitive advantages, it comes naturally. And that capability allows you to get more interesting opportunities. That opens up your career so much more than anything else. So think about all of these secrets as this foundation and building up from competitive advantage and differentiators. And each one of these layers is really a way for you to build those out for yourself. And as early as possible, start practicing these behaviors. Get on great teams. Get with great leaders and mentors who are going to make you better. Forget your job title. Chase the money and chase the experience. Chase the capabilities. Build something. Move from that external motivation to internal motivation so that your career is directed by you, not scattered or directed by someone else. Build that value for yourself as early as possible. Yes, you definitely have to deliver value to the business because they pay your paycheck, but you also have to spend time building value for yourself and creating those sources of authority that come from you. Focus your learning. Don't just learn to learn, which, it's awesome. That should be something that you have as a hobby. But when it comes to self-development professionally, be focused. And again, learn, apply, and as early as possible in your career, start teaching. Teach people what you know, because everything that you know, there are people out there who don't, just like you didn't before you learned it. And you might have a unique way, unique perspective to teach that from, and that's valuable. So learn, apply, and then teach. That's really important. And finally, differentiators and competitive advantages. Develop them. Start early. Focus on building capabilities that make you, again, have a unique value proposition and stand out from the rest of the crowd, because that's going to get you all of these opportunities sooner in your career. And you're going to advance faster because you're a differentiated better than everyone else. And you're working towards being best qualified, best for. And that's when opportunities start coming to you because you have an established reputation and these competitive advantages are the basis of your reputation. It's what makes you stand out and it's why people will start listening to you, following you, and hiring you. So those are my 6 secrets for early career success.